done it in different communities I would propose language that I've seen, that I've either drafted or that I've improved from where I've seen it and basically used elsewhere. And yes, that's what I would suggest.
So one of the issues that I've had with this ordinance, I guess all along, is that I felt like it was very vague and there's not a lot of language. For example, noise is 5 lines long, and I've seen ordinances that are 2 pages long and more detailed. And so I felt that we should start with an ordinance that's much stronger, and then maybe change some things to say we don't agree with the setbacks or the height limits, change those basic things, but still have the structural integrity of something that's much stronger. It sounds like you want to start with this and try to beef it up and do the other way. I just think that's more difficult for us, in my opinion, as a planning commission, because we might not know the exact questions to ask about these things, or exactly, whether then if we have something in front of us that has it all there.
It's
And I guess I want to know why we started with this. Like, where did this come from? Why is this what you guys gave to us? Because I've seen other ordinances drafted by Fahey specifically for some townships in Clinton County, and for example, in Dallas Township, they have a 45 dBA LMAX for day and 40 for night. They have setbacks of 4 times to a non-participating property line, a height limit of 380 feet, no shadow flicker allowed on non-participating properties. Like, if he drafted that same ordinance for them, why is this what we got?
So the reason why that this ordinance was presented to the township is we were asked to work with a model to basically take that model that was used elsewhere,
Where?
And then it was used in Gratiot County. So this is the Gratiot County.
From Albert, straight
so
from Albert.
this is a model that was used elsewhere to be implemented, to be basically to be modified to fit for basically the provisions of your zoning code. So I'm not saying that this is right or wrong, and again, it's a policy decision of how you intend to approach. Basically, when we're tasked to draft an ordinance, it's to reflect basically the needs of the community and our client. And the reason why you see differing ordinances, and you're mentioning Clinton County, is you have differing desires from a particular entity. And so I think you could see that we drafted ordinances in a variety of different counties, and they look very different. Both limiting both wind, solar, just entire. There's many different ordinances that we worked on that look different, that basically govern the same subject matter. And again, you are in the difficult position of determining how you would like to. Essentially, this is the sausage making of determining what the appropriate wind ordinance is for Winfield Township. And I'm not necessarily one to say what the appropriate, in terms of ordinance, is to an extent, but I do view my role of making sure that anything that you draft is defensible. And so, for example, one of the commissioner's question about the compensation to private individuals, I don't think that would be a defensible provision of the zoning ordinance.
I guess I have a question on the application fee. I guess, how does the township determine the cost to charge for an application? It seems like it's pretty broad base there.
Yeah, so how a township determines it is, I've seen basically how I've seen this work for many townships is there would be, in many cases, a flat, non-refundable fee that would be based on kind of a per turbine value, and that would be determined by the township board, usually with some consultation of a planner who has seen these types of projects before. And then there would be a second stage of the application fee, which would be an application escrow. So what that would allow is, let's say you would require a developer to submit $10,000 in escrow, that would basically assist the township with hiring the correct experts and planners that it so desires to review these, which admittedly would, if there is a project, complex application materials, to ensure that those are being reviewed, and then then once that gets depleted, there would be a requirement to fund that balance again, or continue to fund it. So it's I don't want to say it's never ending, but it's reasonably related to the reasonable review of a particular wind application. So that's it. You'd have a flat fee, and then you'd have an application escrow, and that's how I've seen it.
So, I mean, I have an issue with the setbacks, I guess, if we wanna go there. I think that, we could probably do some work on those as well.
You want to touch back on the sound real quick, and
Oh, sure.
we want Kyle to add recommendations to this draft.
Well, whether we, definitely need some more studying in that, whether we do it at the end, after we've got it pretty well solidified, and, it's a tough question.
Well, if he doesn't draft something for us to look at and go over, that's what we need, isn't it?
I think from my perspective, I think we should probably come to at least some consensus on a decibel level. That's probably the most important aspect. Unless you want me to just leave something blank. But that's, I mean, in all reality, that's what how sound is regulated in wind ordinances. It's going to be a decibel level, and then where it's measured from, whether it's measured from an occupied building or elsewhere. There are ordinances out there that measure sound in different ways, but in the overall scheme of things, that's it's a really basic, kind of like a fundamental, at least an elementary analysis to start.
So like I said, keep it simple, write that co-study and that, portion, and, make it so we can read it, like it or not like it.
Yeah, I would suggest we add the suggestions Kyle had, and then change the DB to 45, and that's where we end up. That's the starting point. In agreement that we should at least match solar. We may go lower, we may give it a little bit of leniency, but
Yep.
let's move in that direction for now.
I'd say you probably want something about funding for complaints, but account for complaints to handle, the township don't have to bear that.
I appreciate you add that, that was one of his points. Now, what does the complaint resolution process look like?
So that's would you like to answer that? Or I can
That's what I want, the same question I was gonna ask.
Yeah, so how I've seen this work is you would require, as part of an application for one of these, that an entity submits what is called basically a complaint resolution plan. So they would outline a process to to address citizen complaints. And typically what it looks like is forms would be made available at the township hall as well as online, and there would be also signage by the project that would indicate where you can submit a complaint to. And then that would be initially reviewed by the operator of the project, and then they would address that complaint, or if the complaint did not have any validity, they would not address it, and then report the outcome to the township, so the township knows what happened.
Okay. So that's, the form is available online to the owner of the project?
The
It's just a link to, on our website, we don't own that on our website.
Correct. Yeah. It would be basically a PDF file on your website that would be their complaint form, and then it would have an address or an email address that individuals could submit that to, or a phone number.
Well, I think we got a good start.
Here on the noise, I guess, as far as setbacks, if we want to have a little discussion on that. a separate setback for the lakeside. Make that a little wider.
I guess my recommendation for the setbacks for non-participating would be at least 2 times up height.
I think it should be 4 times the tip height.
Tip height. Yeah.
I think it should be 4 times the tip height, and I say that because, this is from non-participating property lines.
Right.
That's the one I'm talking about, that setback. I mean, what makes a non-participating property a non-participating property?
Good question. So a non-participating property would be a non-participating property.
Well, okay.
No,
but
I'll tell you.
The reason, I know, we all know the answer,
Yeah,
but I'm
yeah.
getting to something.
Yeah.
The reason they're not participating, is it because they rejected an offer, or they turned somebody away, or because nobody ever knocked on their door? If we make that kind of a setback, then the developer may have to knock on more doors, and we get more participating properties. And hey, we get more people benefiting in the same way some people are benefiting, maybe benefiting exclusively, and heck, it becomes something that more people in our community want rather than are afraid of. That's my reasoning on it. It goes to them to bring in more participating properties. Okay, it doesn't mean that there can't be more they're the ones that define to some degree who's participating and who's not. Let it fall on them.
I do think the setbacks will have to be a 2-stage setback though too, because you do have half mile increments, out in the rural ag area. You got half-mile increments on the north and south on the blocks. If you had 4 times road, if everything was a 4 times the tip height, it would be very restrictive.
Yeah, and I'm only talking because then, hey, for participating property lines, you can get right to the property line, right? This is basically a 0 setback.
Get to their house.
For adjacent properties, hey, so, it has the developer, if he's got one person that's participating and he hasn't gone to the neighbor, now maybe he has to. There's nothing wrong with that.
So I agree with what he said. I also feel that if we don't go with a greater setback, then why are we even talking about sound limits and things? Because it's gonna be really difficult to enforce the rest of this and decrease the effect this may have on non-participating properties, if we don't have large setbacks. I think if it's not farther away, then we won't, the ordinance, we're gonna put in 45 potentially, LMAX or whatever it is we choose. It's gonna be difficult, for that to be enforced. It's gonna be difficult to not have shadow flicker on non-participating properties if that's where we go. So I think that there's reasons behind these numbers. There's reasons that there are many, many, many townships that have gone with the 4 times, tip height setback, and so I tend to agree that seems to be a responsible, place to start.
So what happens if we get too restrictive? And my opinion is, if you do research, Consumers Energy, DTE, Ford, GM, every person in this country thinks they want electric. So if we get too restrictive, we force them out of here. Well, we won now, but then they're going to come in, they're going to say, well, guess what? You're going to have a wind tower on it, and we're not going to have any say on it.
No.
So why do we want to make it too restrictive? And then they're going to put right in your front yard. Look, it's eminent domain. If the government wants it.
That's Albert Street.
Hey, let's settle down here.
So my response to that, and I'm not gonna yell back, is that we're not there now, so I don't know why we're assuming that's gonna happen. That's not where we are, and I think where we are right now is we do have a choice, and we do need to be responsible and protect everyone in the township. Not
I guess the problem with the 4 times, I mean, maybe that works in Gratiot or Beale City where it's wide open. I mean, how many wide open 120, 160 acre fields we got in Winfield Township?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's way
None.
to go here.
Okay, but how many of that size, those size areas are where there's, you know, a few property owners that are adjacent to each other, that ends up happening? And that's why I'm saying, who says it's too restrictive unless you, I mean, you find out.
I do think you gotta have a setback from roads and
Yep.
other things that's much smaller. Because if you are truly wanting to preserve farmland, I don't need a road on any farm going all the way to the center of the block. I mean, you're using up a lot of money. You do need to have a
Yep.
two-stage setback.
Yes, oh yeah, I mean, inside the boundary of participating properties, you do have that stuff, and those are just about safety, you know, it's just the height of the turbine and stuff.
I think it might be difficult, given the conversation we've had, that for us to come to an agreement on this. So I guess I would like your opinion at this point. What?
So with this, that's a very good observation, and I agree. I think what we should do is, I think we honestly. So there's a couple ways I think we can evaluate this. One is we could look at a variety of different ordinances, which it looks like many people have looked at, but maybe bring ordinances related to setbacks to your next meeting, and then maybe leave the figure honestly blank right now, and then see where that comes out to. Because you know it's really a determination, and I'm going to sound like a broken record that you know in the Gratiot ordinance, some folks over there feel that these setbacks for non-participating properties are appropriate and they believe they're working. In other communities, they don't believe that, and I think we need to there has to be at least some consensus, and there might not be consensus from everybody on this particular issue, but in reality, it's just placing a number. The only 2 points I wanted to make, and just kind of respectfully, is I don't think setbacks necessarily have an impact on other performance standards. They do from an extent that, you know, let's say you have a 4-time setback that just from the noise potential from a turbine, that may be a lot less. But I think you have to look, you have to split basically the noise regulations from setbacks because they're independent from each other. So no matter what the setback is, let's say that there was a 45 decibel noise limitation. Well, that would probably prohibit, right, a turbine from being 50 feet from that property. So the setback value is not necessarily contingent on the performance standard for sound. And then I lost my train of thought for the second point, but I'm sure if I find it, I'll let you know. But that's I just wanted to make that clear. Oh, I found it. The second point is I hear some folks talking about, you know, what happens if you have a 4-time setback, what does that do? What does that look like of the availability of potential buildable area in the township? And I'm not sure if that's the concern of everybody or it's a concern of some, but one thing the township could consider is when you're thinking about setbacks is, I know there is the ability to do some sort of mapping to determine, you know, from various parcels what it would look like, the buildable area of the township. I know it's a little bit difficult, honestly, though, because you won't know who is non-participating at this point, or who is, I mean, you may know who is participating, non-participating from other record sources, but you won't know until really you get an application. So, with that being said, I think you should leave the term blank and maybe look at a few other ordinances and maybe ask around both communities that have been, you know, I hate using the terms restrictive, and then communities where there is a project, but their ordinance may be more comprehensive than other communities, and just maybe asking and seeing, you know, what do you think of these setbacks, and maybe doing your own independent research of determining what you think is an appropriate setback.
Well, property lines certainly will be a big discussion. We had a pretty good start tonight. Any other questions for Kyle?
What does the committee think on the overlay district, or how to address this? Is it something we should discuss, or at least have a plan for our next meeting to bring some maps of the township and start looking at what a good overlay district would look like?
Yeah, whether we want to have a certain setback from the lakeside residential, I think we can definitely make that a pretty wide area. Any other questions?
I don't know if we're trying to like move on to public comment or what, but I think shadow flicker is another thing that we should probably address. I've heard.
Well, whether we get to it tonight or the next meeting, but
I guess I personally don't feel that it's appropriate to subject a non-participating property to shadow flicker. So the 30 hours a year I feel is unreasonable. No.
Is it possible that we could do the questions so we just don't hear the answer?
Is zero flicker possible? On a
Absolutely.
property? Is it even possible?
Absolutely. Yes.
So,
So-
oh, go ahead.
Quickly, my question was, or my suggestion was that we discuss shadow flicker because our current ordinance allows for 30 hours of shadow flicker on a non-participating property, and I basically stated that I felt that was unreasonable and that a non-participating property or landowner should not be subjected to shadow flicker at all.
So to answer the subsequent question, I have seen ordinances that impose a zero requirement for non-participants. I believe it's possible. It's just it's a matter of economic feasibility. I've seen a different level, it's possible from the sense of it's possible. So I know I'm getting a lot of response from the crowd, and I appreciate the response. But what I'm trying to explain is it's really the determination of how you want of what you feel is appropriate. So I'll give a very brief example. Let's say there are townships in Michigan that allow multi-use or apartments, or student housing, right? And there are zoning districts that allow student housing, and they may be close to residential areas. Student housing may have sound that's associated with it. In those areas, you see different types of regulation where they may not impose a sound standard like you see in wind and you see in some of these other sophisticated ordinances, but they are determining distances in other ways. So what I'm saying is, what I'm basically saying is, I think you have to come to a consensus on what you think is appropriate for non-participating property owners in terms of shadow flicker the face. And I think you can see with multiple land uses, farms, obviously there are protections from the Right to Farm Act, but there are noises and odors and smells that impact other people. And the purpose of zoning is to determine the orderly development of land uses, basically in a township, and to the best you can both balance the regulations related to particular land uses with imposing potential nuisances on others. And so the short answer is yes, it's possible, I believe, from a standpoint, but will it allow a project, the wind project? In many of the communities that I've seen that have had wind projects, there is the ability to cast some shadow flicker on non-participants. So whether that is feasible, I'm not a wind developer. I haven't worked for a wind development company, so I don't know what makes a project feasible or not feasible for one of those for basically this type of use. But I can do some independent research and I can see if there have been instances where that there is a zero shadow flicker requirement and that there has been a project. I think that would basically on non-participants that would basically confirm that it is possible. But whether it's appropriate is really up to all of you.
All right, well, I think we had a good start anyway. This time I will open it up to public comment. Please. I'm talking, please, sir. Like I said, this is public comment. Please state your name. You'll have 3 minutes to talk. You have 1 chance to speak. We're not going to interrupt the speakers. Everybody can sit and listen. If you're unable to do that, Officer Smith will be gladly escort you out of the room.
Wow.
So let's have a good public comment. Who would like to go first?
Use the mic. I do not like speaking up.
One second.
It's short anyways. My name is Sue Braunschneider, and I'm from Indian Lake, and I'm gonna just read it because I wrote it. I asked the other lake residents not to be appeased by their talk of keeping the lake views pristine while selling out the rest of the township views. We are stronger in numbers.
Thank you.
Okay, who's next?
I'll go next.
Sorry, I'm short. Jamie Slater, Cato Township. You guys are talking about setbacks. My family has property in Winfield. They are not leasing. I do not see the reasoning why they would have to suffer having shadow flicker, 600-foot turbines in their backyards. It's just not feasible. If any of you are leasing, want that, that's fine. They haven't leased. They don't deserve that. It's not appropriate. They should not have to deal with the sound. They should not have to deal with the flicker. So that's all I have to say, but take into consideration those who are not benefiting by choice. Thank you.
Cheryl Hauser, Maple Valley Township. We need to consider property loss values. Are these things coming to your community? I don't understand why you're reinventing the wheel when Sydney has an excellent ordinance in the favor of the majority of the public. And for you, Kyle, to talk about conflict of interest, doesn't your firm represent Apex?
It absolutely does not.
No,
We represent the township.
Nobody in your firm represents.
Nobody in our firm represents Apex.
Okay, how many?
And I know I feel obligated to answer, and I apologize to the chair if I'm answering questions. I know we'd like most of the communication to come to the planning commission so they can evaluate for their own independent, I guess, to take the views of the community to help them make decision making. But no, our firm does not represent Apex. I'm in the municipal group of our firm. I represent mostly townships and a variety of other municipal entities.
How many restrictive ordinances